Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability. This is a podcast dedicated to putting the human back into humanity. And I've got the perfect guest this evening for you in Renee Smith, who is founder and CEO of A Human Workspace and previous director of workplace transformation at Government Results in Washington. Welcome to the podcast, Renee.
Thank you. It's so great to meet you, Gary, finally. This has been a long time coming.
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Lots of anticipation. It's fun to talk with you today.
Thank you. As we get going, I'd really appreciate it if you can tell us, you know me, a lot of people know me and how much I believe in people-centric workplaces. Would you mind expanding on what is a human workplace and how did that come into being for you?
Yeah. So I think of a human workplace, by definition, as a professional environment where the environment itself is working to align with all the good things that we know about human physiology and neurobiology. That we're not working against those things, but we're working in concert with those things to create essentially psychological safety, and that we do that by decreasing fear in the workplace and increasing what I would describe as love in the workplace. So that's like in a nutshell, that's a human workplace to me. It's
amazing. And I just think, isn't it amazing that those two words, they're huge words in the workplace, love and fear.
Yes.
And neither of them are particularly comfortable for senior leaders in my experience to date. So I'm really interested, how did this work show up for you? Why does it matter so much to you?
Yeah, so I have to kind of take you back, and I think on a personal journey, right? We're gonna go way back, back to the late '80s, early '90s, even. That's a long ways. But so much of like when we find ourselves at certain points of our lives and careers, I think we can better see the steps that brought us to this moment, and I know that for me, the conviction that I have in this moment about the work that I'm doing and why and how I'm doing it really has its roots in some pretty early transformative experiences that were difficult and that required courage and boldness, really. And so that definitely the boldness and courage to be declaring love and more love and less fear in the workplace right now has its roots way back then. So what happened? I was a young person who was pretty successful in school and on a college path, and off to do big things in the world, and then kind of lost my way and ended up getting married pretty early and dropping out of school and following my husband to Alaska, where we lived in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska for a time, kind of where Deadliest Catch takes place, and overlooking the Bering Sea and all that. We lived there for a while, and then we lived in Homer, Alaska for a while, so 8 years up there altogether. And it was really following his dreams and kind of abandoning mine, and enjoying life and an adventure. But in the midst of all of that, he actually, we had 2 small children at the time, and we had been married 7 years, and he was in a plane crash. He crashed a small plane in the Caribou Hills outside Ninilchik on the Kenai Peninsula. And he sustained a traumatic brain injury and was never the same. And so I really looked at that time, at that experience, and seized that moment as this is my time to live into my values, to live my commitment, to kind of show what I'm made of, if you will, and to rise to this occasion and live out love in this situation. And so even though it was sort of like having another child, really, it was sort of like being married to a young teenager in some ways. Persevered through that and tried to continue with life, and stayed together for 8 more years and had 2 more children, and eventually left Alaska and came down to the lower 48. And finally, after all that time, came to clarity that it was just a harmful situation to me and my children now, and there was too much dissonance, and that I was free to leave. I was free to step away. But stepping away meant, stepping away from that life and into what, right? And there was a big, I had to rediscover what that meant and decide for myself what I was going to do next. And so with a lot of family support and a lot of, yeah, I guess using a lot of courage, I went back to school, got my degree in organizational behavior, and then my master's in organization development at Pepperdine. And all with 4 kids in tow and working and all of that, and found my way into this career that I love, which is really about optimizing human experience in systems. And that's kind of the academic speak way, or the organizational way of saying that, but it's about making sure that people can give and be and do their best, and that organizations can perform their best, and that those two things go together. And so that was the path that I was on, and all of that had profound moments of having to do really hard things. I used to say, I can do anything for 2 years. This is really hard right now, that trying to, finish my undergraduate degree, but it's going to be 2 years and I can do anything for 2 years. And I got done with that. And then it was like, okay, I'm in this master's program and I love it. But again, children and work and all of the things of life, and okay, but I can do anything for 2 years again. And then really there was another 2-year season of finding my way into my job and into more, deeply into my career. And so, hard things, courage and boldness, and having to just sort of step out in new ways. And again, finding my voice and reclaiming what I felt like I had kind of lost and left behind. And there was definitely joy in that. And there was definitely also some pain and dealing with regret in that too. But, flash forward to gosh, well, the, late 2010s, I get, no, I'm saying that wrong. 2010, 11, and then as I went to state government in 2012, really more focused on continuous improvement in my work, and building cultures of continuous improvement. And it was when I was at the Department of Enterprise Services working with our director, Chris Liu, who's a really seasoned leader, that we had this conversation that changed my life. And I asked him point blank in this conversation, so, I said, Chris, what do you think is the most important job of a leader? And he answered immediately without hesitation, to eliminate fear from the workplace. And it was just that's so beautiful. Isn't that a great answer? I just loved it. So and it resonated, right? It resonated with me as something that I'd seen him try to do, and he had encouraged us as his executive team to try to do. And when we'd done that well, good things had happened. And when we'd not done that so well, not such good things. And so I, started really pursuing understanding the fear at work. And that led inevitably to the conclusion that something had to take its place, and that thing that takes fear's place is love. And so when I, with courage, with boldness, maybe with some naivety, I don't know. But I would say it was with courage, said that out loud in a big public professional forum, 400 people in the room. You could have heard a pin drop. And I kind of expected that, right? I knew it's a pretty radical thing to say, but it was the right thing to say. And actually, the room needed to hear me say that. The room needed to contemplate that. And I have the deep conviction that we all need to think about that and really come to grips with that choice between fear and love. And so said that out loud and made a joke then to sort of break the tension, and then went on to explain what I meant, that we love our work. We love the people that we're serving. We care about the people that we work with. We want to do good. We want to contribute. We want to matter. We want to be cared about ourselves. And in doing all of this, because it's a huge part of our lives. So of course, love is something that belongs at work. And that's just, and when we are in a condition where we feel loved, we give and do and can be our very best. And there was spontaneous applause in the room. 400 people, yeah. And, for weeks later, people were emailing me and stopping me in the halls and other agencies. And, and they would say to me, I was there when you said that. Keep saying that. And I thought, whoa, okay, wait a second. I've put my hand on something. I've touched something here that I need to understand better. And so that set me on a journey to not only sort of better understand fear, but to better understand love. And so, yeah, the early, like the early roots of facing difficulty, of facing sort of, real deep personal challenge and hardship, and having to face my own humanity, having to face the humanity of, my husband, and struggling through those things, and then having to make decisions that were authentic and learn to speak up into the world again when I felt behind, eventually professionally. And all of that infuses what I do now. All of that infuses the, I think that the humanity that I bring to the, the moments that we can talk about later in our human workplace gatherings. I think it infuses that, because it's just like built into who I am, that struggle, and also the deep care for people. So, yeah.
Renee, thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably and openly. And I just think, there's so many questions, but there's one I'd really like to ask, which is actually, as you reflect on that introduction you just shared kindly with myself and our listeners today, what do you think has been one or two of the major learnings for you, as in for your growth? What's helped you? So, okay, you stepped into your courage, we understand that, but what are some of the learnings from that experience as you reflect that you still hold dear as you go on to serve in the future?
Yeah. So a couple come to mind. One is this idea of investing in yourself, and that you're a good investment, right? And so for me, investing in myself back in 2000 looked like in going back to college, right? And even though I could have found a job and slugged it through, and but know that I was worthy of investing in an excellent education, and that investment paved the way for everything else that's happened. And so I'm a big fan of higher education, or at least in the right kind of investment, the right kind of education that's going to be aligned with who you are and what you want to do. And that was the right thing for me. And it definitely, it was costly. It costly in time and treasure and all of that, but it has absolutely been worthy and worth it to do that. I think the other thing is that in all of this, boldly stepping forward, doing hard things, investing in myself, that there comes a moment when I had to declare myself, and no one else was going to do that for me. And I'll tell you a story about what happened that really crystallized that for me. And that was, again, one of these pivotal moments. So I was working as an administrative assistant in an office, in a dental practice, paying bills, and while I'm in school and trying to make ends meet. And I had begun to already, this is when I was in my master's program, and I'd already begun to do some consulting work, and take this work out into small business and to nonprofits and whatnot. In certain ways, but it was a very beginning. And this woman came in, and she was a new patient and filling out her forms, and she handed them back to me, and she began to tell me about herself, and that she was the executive director of a chapter of communities and schools in our local area. And she went on to say, we're in the middle of this big transformation, this important time of transition, and need to do some strategic planning. And she's just, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but, and why she was telling me, the administrative assistant in the dental practice, this, it made no sense, but she did. And as she's describing this, I thought I could help her with that. Like, that's my work, right? But it was a moment. And so I looked at her and I just said it. I said, well, I can help you with that. And that was a declaration moment, right? If I hadn't made that declaration to her, the whole next year of working with them deeply and doing, very kind of sensitively planned strategic planning work that was thoughtful to their moment and condition, and that got them out in the community in a whole new way, and that they seized on and went on to new levels of performance and engagement and growth, and just beautiful things came out of that year with them. And then for me professionally, then other connections from that experience that led to other engagements and really the launching of my career. And it all came from that moment of saying, I can help you with that. So I think declaring yourself is an important thing, that especially when we're transitioning from being some other person in the world to being in a new and different way in the world. We've got to declare ourselves.
They're just those people that listen to this podcast, my whole body is just going buzz, 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 buzz. Honestly, it's one, the story, Renee, but it's how you show up. Like your ability to just speak your truth and your experience. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
It's so clear. Yeah, that clarity piece. And I think what's really interesting, you're building your career from having the courage to speak up in a dental surgery. Not many people have got that story.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. But we often, we all start in humble places, right? And there's nothing wrong with, a career in a dental surgery either, right? But for me, that wasn't where I ultimately belonged. We all have places where we ultimately want to be and feel drawn to. And so that was an important place to be, to feed my kids. And the thing is about that moment, like it could have easily slipped right by in like the social pressure of it not being appropriate to speak up, or me like holding self-doubt, like I haven't quite done exactly what she's saying. And particularly as women, women tend to second guess that moment. And so I'm just all about trying to remember to just say it, to just own it, to claim it, to step into that.
It's so beautiful, because both those points around investing in yourself and claiming your spot in the world. It's really funny because I'm a little bit behind you on that journey, and what I've been experiencing the last sort of 6 months even, Renee, is so I work in a big corporate job. I've done some of my own transformation within a team at work, but I've sort of done it. I'm a sales guy, and I've done the people bit that I love, and I'm here to do sort of behind, like the Trojan horse of the day job. And what I'm finding is I'm probably coming close to your experience of actually just stepping up and saying, I still want to be here, but I want to be this while I'm here, rather than what you want me to be. And I'm sure that's going to resonate with so many of our listeners. Is like, what's going to stop us? And I want to come back to your point about fear and love, because I think the only thing that's going to stop us stepping into our full power is a lack of self-belief and fear, or maybe the other side with love, just a lack of self-compassion, not believing we're worthy.
Yeah, the self-doubt. And so, when I think about, not believing that we're worthy or that we can be what the moment's needed. And I think somehow we also can think that, that others who have stepped into that space are somehow, that they've got something magical or something else special going on that somehow we don't have. And I just think that's not true. And I, discovered that's not true. That was one of the beautiful gifts that my master's program actually gave. Pepperdine's MSOD program is really dear to my heart, because it, I like to say that it's a Master of Science in Organization Development, but I like to say that it was really a Master of Self. The S is actually self instead of science, or both, I guess. But there were, we were in residence with thought leaders. At the time it was for 8 days in residence, and then work back home, and then come together 8 days a quarter for 2 years. That's the right way to say that. And so, we would have people that wrote the books, and that were again, the thought leaders that would come and be with us in residence wherever we were in the world. And, it's not just in a classroom and having an engagement or maybe even meeting in a, outside class over coffee for a discussion or something, but it was over breakfast. And, and then it was throughout the day. And then it was, after hours in the evening, sitting around, like really talking about these concepts that we were learning about and the practice of them. And what I learned in that was that, that I had something to contribute. Here I was coming from being, the woman who dropped out of college, who got her degree late, who, had all these kids, who didn't have the big, deep career at the time, and felt behind and catching up. And yet, sitting across the table from, these highly respected people that feel like the magic people that must have something special going on. Like, no, I could contribute to that conversation. And that realization has also really propelled, what I'm doing now. So I want to share a poem with you. Can I share a poem?
Please.
Yeah, I love this poem. It's a David Whyte poem, and I think it kind of speaks to this, what we're talking about, this moment um, of self-realization, or of wanting to bring ourselves out, and like, where do we begin? How do we do that when we might be hesitating and uncertain? And the poem's called Start Close In. He says this: start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way of starting the conversation. Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple. To find another's voice, follow your own voice, and wait until that voice becomes a private ear listening to another. Start right now. Take a small step you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third, but start with the first thing close in, the step you don't want to take. Isn't that awesome?
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, because
Yeah.
it really makes me think about, so often, I'm a big thinker as well, so I can look forward 5 years, go, why aren't we there yet? Like, here's all the steps we can take. But it is that it's being okay with marginal gains. It's being okay taking those steps by steps and not needing, because I think part of the challenge for me, Renee, and I'd love to hear how the human workspace that you're looking to bring to the world, and also the gatherings that you're creating. One of the big challenges for me is still the short-termism of thinking and life versus enjoying the journey of life. And I'm just wondering what that means to you in terms of sort of embracing life versus the short-termism that we've all been brought up on.
Yeah. And say more about what you mean by short-termism.
So what I mean is, if I think about like the financial markets, for example, or if you work in a corporation, everything's about the next quarter. So all of the behaviors, all of the energy then becomes about the next quarter and not about what we might achieve on a longer term basis.
Yeah, that is a struggle for sure. There are always going to be those pressures on leaders, particularly those who are closely tied to the market, to attend to that more than they're attending to the long-term, more sustainable culture and way of working. And it's hard, because I think there are, by not creating a human workplace, there are short-term impacts that are immediate, but they're just hard to see and quantify. They're insidious. They're in the, we got to fill that position again, because somebody just left that supervisor's, team again. And, we slog through it, and we just kind of consider it the cost of doing business, right? And just something we got to endure because this is how it is. Well, maybe not, maybe whatever's happening there is, if we looked and really and found out and dug a little bit, maybe we would find that that there are inhumane kinds of practices going on in that team that are driving people away, and it is costing us immediately dearly. But we've got to be able to be more circumspect to truly see that, and to surface those kinds of tolls that are being taken on organizations and on people.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love that word insidious, actually, because I think it's helpful for us to think about. Actually, it is sometimes the unseen that are the things, the opportunities. And I think it's the same in us. And I love how, again, back to your own journey, is often we don't see in ourselves our greatness. We don't see how good we are or the opportunity within ourselves. And I'm wondering, how do you go about trying to help people see inside themselves the opportunity that maybe they can't see in themselves?
I would, the thing that I think that's a hard thing for me to answer. I think that there's sometimes, I get feedback that it's sort of how perhaps how I show up with people. And so it's harder for me to speak to that. But I think the thing that I can more easily speak to is the gatherings that, and what I see happening and the value that people are finding in themselves and communicating with each other in these gatherings, which actually I should say does have this connection to immediate benefits in organizations as well, and in different workplaces. So maybe I could let me describe what those are,
Please, that'd be great.
And help me remember to weave it back to the question that you just asked too, if I don't quite get to it. So I did all this research on love and fear. And started interviewing people, informal research interviews, and asking them stories about times when they felt afraid at work and when they felt loved at work, and gathered those stories and kind of went away to the ocean with them and looked at all that data for about 4 days and found the themes and found the pattern in it all, and found like types of stories that people told about fear and about love. And I should say that many people readily use the word love and didn't have a problem using that word in terms of their workplace experience. And a whole lot of other people would say, well, I wouldn't use that word, but they would use, a substitute. They would use respect or trust or empathy or inclusion or appreciation or kindness, something like that. All of which have their roots in love. They're all sort of versions of love. And then people would talk about different particular things that leaders had done, particular things that teams had done. And they would talk about, people being there when they were in crisis, personal crisis, and support that they received. And like those were kind of the different versions of love, and those kinds of different settings were like the intersection of the stories. And so in all of that, doing all that research, some of it I did in, a lot of it in one-on-one interviews, but some of it in group workshops, where I would have people interview each other and then tell each other stories back to the group, and then we would analyze those stories together and got the insights and data from those stories. And one group of 8 people at the end of the day on a Friday afternoon, after like it's hard work doing all this like storytelling and bearing your soul and analysis and all of this, like it was exhausting, and yet they hung around at the end of this Friday afternoon and didn't want to leave, and kept talking for like another half hour, and they named themselves the Love Squad. And they wanted t-shirts, and they wanted to get together again. And so I said, sure, we can get together again. We're at this point we're in state government, and like we got no money for t-shirts, but we can absolutely get together again. And so that was where the Human Workplace Gatherings were born, was in this request to get together. And so we started with these 50 people that I, interviewed, and made this mailing list of 50, and 20 people showed up in December of 2017 to the first gathering. And really it was exploratory. It was, what could this be? Like, what might we do? What could we talk about and practice here? And over time then has evolved to where now we have a Human Workplace Olympia, a Human Workplace Seattle, a Human Workplace San Diego that are ongoing. And then I've also held gatherings in Reykjavik. We've held 2 in Copenhagen, 1 in Barcelona, and I have people interested in hosting in New York City and in Salem, Oregon, and Portland, in Atlanta and Spokane, and in Rome, in New Zealand. And so there's a whole, and perhaps even in Manila, there's a whole, interest in like, how do we bring what's happening, what we've done in Olympia to these other places? And then in Olympia, particularly now, we've gone from a mailing list between, all of the lists. I think we've got 1,700 that we're, reaching out to, every month, and on the list. And in Olympia, we get regularly 60 to 80 people that show up, about a third new every time. I just yesterday sold out in about 6 hours, 120 seats for the next Human Workplace Gathering that happens to be partnering with the Black Communities Business Resource Group, the business resource group that's part of state government, and we're co-hosting, and it will be on the Black experience, and it sold out in 6 hours. So we're going to be looking to see if we can open more seats, just because there's such demand, and we can reach more folks, get more folks there. So what happens though in these gatherings, and getting to people finding value, people feeling seen, people feeling connected, and having a sense of belonging, is that these gatherings are about building relationships and creating with whoever shows up in that particular gathering, a sense of connection and community and belonging, no matter if they've been there before or not, no matter if they know each other or not. And that we invest deeply for about the first half hour in building of a 2-hour workshop, or a 2-hour, gathering, I should say. We invest about a half an hour in building those relationships. And then the next 75 minutes or so is on the topic, and the topic might be trust or empathy, or we've done the science of awe outside, gratitude and appreciation, and the different kinds of topics. So basically exploring different experiences, different expressions of love and humanity in a professional setting. And those 75 minutes have a little tiny teaching component. It's not expert at the front of the room talking at people. And instead, it's just giving people enough to then practice, to reflect on, to dialogue about, to have conversations and explore together, and to discover what it is to be human at work, what it is to be human in a professional setting. And built into each of those topics is always what I would call some kind of a micro behavior, because we have these moments that are essential in organizations, that we need to show up humanely and as, fully human. And when we get those right, it helps propel our cultures forward. But when we get those little moments wrong, it's counterproductive. So we practice things like listening from the heart. We practice seeing each other. We practice being able to share and disclose about something. We practice witnessing someone's emotions. We practice, affirming. I mean, and these sound like, well, maybe sort of like head-slappingly simple, and yet they are so foreign in so many situations for people in the workplace. Like we leave all of that at the door to come in and be professional. And what people have said clearly is, no, I want my workplace to acknowledge that I'm human and to let me be human. And if you do that, I will give you my all. I will be loyal. I'll bring it. I will feel trust and safety, so that I will go to the ends of the earth to make this organization successful. But if not, if I don't get that, if I get that you don't really care about who I am, and you're not going to sort of provide an environment where I'm psychologically safe, back to what we talked about at the beginning, then no way. I'm going to hold back. People just naturally withdraw. And we've all seen it. I mean, if we were to explore stories, with each other and with listeners, and we've all got those stories. So what I find is that in this environment, in these human workplace gatherings where we're doing this deep relational work and then practicing real skills around how to be human together, that it draws people out, and they get confident about both who they are as people and being able to practice these skills at work. And they go back to work and they are different. And they are infusing their team, they're infusing their, supervisory relationships, or the management, or their leadership. We have people at all levels that, join us. They're infusing their workplaces with more humanity and with more love.
It's so beautiful. It seems so obvious, but it's so hard at the same time for people if you're not used to being. For the period of this podcast, people must be able, or they learn with you, Renee, how vulnerability's got to be a part of that. To be able to feel
totally.
your emotions,
yes,
must be part of that journey, I would imagine.
It's essential. Yes, it's built into all of that I just talked about. It is vulnerability all the way. The effort, or the thoughtfulness around how we come together to make it okay to be vulnerable, right, is that's part of what we're really paying attention to and trying to care around. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when I first talk to people, particularly like folks in HR or in leadership, and we talk about the concepts of decreasing fear and increasing different versions of love and making work more human, that there's people can pretty readily connect to their own experience, and when you tie in the neurophysiology to all of that, it makes sense. We don't want to be in a fight or flight or freeze or appease mode. We want to be in a more connected, rested, and relaxed place where we feel psychologically safe. Like all of that makes sense. But then the next step is usually, well, what are the formal programs and policies that we can put in place? And what are all of the usual organizational levers that we can pull to make that happen? And so we then tend to try to make a program out of all of that. And there's absolutely, needs to be all of the usual programs, and we need to think about, organizational strategy and structures that are in place, and the processes and policies in place, and the people that we're hiring, and what we're rewarding, all of the organizational design elements. We've got to think about all that and make sure that if we're going to say that we're going to be about decreasing fear and increasing some version of love and making work more human, that we tend to all of those things. But we can also do all of those things and have the little micro moments undermine it all. And so, it's the human moments day to day in the workplace, in a team, between a leader and a team member, or, among team members, that make or break all of that formal stuff. And so if we're not attending to creating an environment where we stop and we turn and we face someone to truly listen to them, and we look them in the eye and we turn away from our devices and our computer, and we hear them, and if we're not doing that, for example, but instead we give them a flip answer, or we're sort of half paying attention, then we're subtly communicating that all of those programs are really just, that's just words, that's just stuff on paper, that's just organization stuff that really they don't mean it. And so, we've got to pair the building micro skills, these essential human skills, with those organizational mechanisms that we put in place. And if we have both, then we've got more of a fighting chance to make a difference and to really be successful.
It's so intriguing for me, because certainly my own experience as well. It's not as if any of the stuff you're sharing kindly with us today is not already there.
Right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. It's not. It's not rocket science, right? And yet, what are we doing? What are we doing?
It's so interesting. As we start to wrap up, you're an absolute joy, Renee. And I'm so grateful for you joining me today. I'd love you to maybe just leave with the listeners just another reflection, not necessarily advice, but if we've got some senior leaders listening now, or maybe someone even at home with their partner is struggling to feel into their emotions or to really use the word love, do you have any sort of recommendations, maybe some signposts to some of the work that you're doing, just to get them to build some confidence around this term?
So I would say one of the things that you can do is there's part of the research prompts that I used were, tell me a story about a time when you felt afraid at work. What happened? What did you do? What did others do? What was the impact of that on you and on your work and on your team and on your body and on your personal life? And what did it mean to you? And then tell a story about a time when you felt loved at work, in whichever version of love you would choose to portray, right? And what happened? What did you do? And what did others do? And the impact, and what did it mean to you? And I would encourage some pausing, like take some time. That's a good time maybe to journal, right? To take a little bit of time and reflect on your own experience. Journal a time when you felt afraid at work. Like really think about that. And I have a link on my website actually, where I'm doing some work with Marcel Schwantes to gather stories to further deepen that work. So you could go on the website and even share it if you wanted. But reflect on your own experience. Consider what the impact of fear has been on you, and then consider what the impact of that loving experience was on you. And I haven't met anyone yet. I've met no one who said to me, oh no, bring the toxic fear and like, I'm going to do my best work. I work best when I'm scared spitless. Like nobody says that. People do want to be challenged. Like people are eager to be challenged. And I would actually say that challenge from a leader or from colleagues, like, no, we think you can do that. Or here's a new step. We want you to take on this hard assignment that you've never done before. or take on this task or this role, or that kind of challenge. We're eager for that. We're eager for somebody to believe in us that we can do that, and that's a version of love. But that's not toxic unless it's just like we're set up to fail. That's a different story. But being challenged and the fear that comes with like wondering if we're going to be able to do it or not, be able to succeed, that's good and healthy. So I would just encourage reflecting on our own experiences and understanding how those have played out for us, and then considering we take all kinds of risks as leaders. Like, we take them all the time. We calculate the risk. And I would just offer that I think the risk of not creating a human workplace is far, far greater than the risk of continuing with the status quo, and leading with fear or allowing fear to be insidious in our environment. That, like, the risk that we have of people disconnecting and disengaging, is far greater. So why not? Why not do it? Why not go for it? Why not, in this opportunity, make the choice to like be that leader that you want to look back on at the end of your career and say, this is when I turned a corner and I, became the leader that I'd always wanted to be, that I want to talk about when I retire, that I would want to write a book about, or that I'd want somebody, to stand up and say, you made this difference. You took a chance on me. You believed in me. We created this amazing team environment. We did this incredible thing for our customers. Like, all of that happens when people really believe and trust and belong with each other, when they have that sense of belonging. And it all starts, right, Gary, with vulnerability. So I love the name of your podcast, because you nailed it right there.
Well, just thank you, Renee. Honestly, you're an absolute inspiration. I'm really pleased we got this time together, and I just think you've just polished off a wonderful conversation perfectly. Why would you not? And what are the risks of not?
Right. Well, we know from the Gallup survey data, right? We know from most organizations' employee engagement survey data that what we're doing isn't working. As a professional culture in the West, what we are doing is not working. So really, what's the risk of trying love for a few decades? That might do us some good. I think it would.
Wonderful. How can people find you, Renee? What's the best way? What's websites, social media?
Yeah, so my business is a Human Workplace, and so you can find me at humanworkplace.com or makeworkmorehuman.com, and my email is renee@makeworkmorehuman.com. And I've had the great joy over the last many years to be a public servant in Washington state government, and to be director of workplace transformation in the governor's Results Washington office. And it's been such a privilege to do that work. And beginning in March, I am stepping away from that and as an employee, and bringing this work more broadly to the world, and focusing full time on writing a book and on holding human workplace gatherings around the world, and sharing this message that's sorely needed. So.
Wonderful. Well, look, thank you for sharing it. It's inspired me. I know it will have inspired other people. And good luck with your next journey. And let's keep in touch.
Well, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Cheers, Renee. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.